That is craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of identity by the Blessed One. Lady, cessation of identity is said. What is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visakha, it is the remainderless fading away and cessation, the giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting of that same craving. What does that mean? They practiced.
That's 6 hours.
That's 6 hours. Although they didn't call it that then. They practiced right effort. That's how you get rid of craving. So there is seeing an unwholesome state, letting go of that unwholesome state and relaxing. Smiling and bringing up that wholesome state and keeping that wholesome state going. Excuse me, I got something caught. This is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One. Lady, the way leading to the cessation of identity. The way leading to the cessation of identity is said. Got a tickle with it this time. It's weird. What is called the way leading to the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visakha, it is just this noble eightfold path. Now, when we start talking about the eightfold path, it's right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and so on. Always with right. The Pali word for right is sama, but there's other definitions of sama too. And one of them can be harmonious. So I pick harmonious. Because if it's right, then there's wrong, and then everything is black and white. But as we know in life, not everything is black and white. There's shades of gray. So when we call harmonious, when you're in harmony with what you're doing, everything flows along very easily. There's no effort. So, I use, and I tend to change all of the Eightfold Path a little bit. Instead of calling it right view, I call it harmonious perspective. Your harmonious perspective is the perspective of everything that arises is part of an impersonal process. When you're out of harmony with your perspective, that means that you're taking whatever arises personally. And that causes your mind to get tight, and you start coming up with an awful lot more clinging stories, opinions, concepts, ideas, and identifying with all of those as yours. When anger arises, whose anger is it? I'm mad. I don't like this. I don't want it to be that way. When you practice smiling and develop a sense of humor about yourself, then you can laugh at being caught by the anger and it goes from being I'm mad and I don't like it to it's only anger. And it's very easy to let it go. That's why this is a harmonious perspective, because it keeps harmony with everything around you and in you. Now the next of the Eightfold Path is called right thought. I call it harmonious imaging. You hold an image of the way you want things to be. You hold an image with your thoughts. You hold images of the way you think the world is around you. For instance, I have a friend back in Missouri. She is always broke. And she holds the idea that she can never get any money. She's holding that image in her mind. That's not a harmonious image, because there is the I am that attached to it. The harmonious image would be uplifting. It would have a lot of positivity. So the more you hold these positive images of what's happening in the present moment, the easier the present moment is to be in. You're not leaning out of the present moment, you're accepting the present moment as it is, and you're holding a positive image. You get caught in a traffic jam. I hate being in a traffic jam. See what kind of image that is?
Mm-hmm.
Now, being in a traffic jam is good or bad depending on your perspective.
That's right.
If you look at being in a traffic jam as an opportunity to radiate loving kindness to other people around you, then it's not a bad thing at all, right? It's a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with the image is we have the choice to make with what we do with our mind in the present moment. We can fall back in our old habitual ways of acting like you always act when you get caught in a traffic jam. Grr, I hate this traffic. I wonder what the problem is. Why can't we be moving? Those kind of images that you're holding don't lead to your happiness and well-being or the happiness of other people around you. Those kind of images that you're holding lead to your suffering and lead to suffering in the future, because you develop that habit. Every time you get in a traffic jam, it's going to happen in the same way. So you have the choice to make. Either act and react the way you always act when you get caught in a traffic jam, or not. You can respond by seeing the dislike start to arise and 6R it. And since you already have a smile in your mind, you might as well put a smile on your face and start radiating loving kindness to everybody around you, because you know what their mind is doing. Their mind is having that same kind of process happening. So you have the opportunity to start directing your mind in a positive vein, in a positive way, by responding with the 6 R's and holding a positive image for people around you that will lead to their happiness and well-being too. You'll start seeing other people in the cars. When you smile at them, they start smiling back, and they're complete strangers. You don't know them. When you're walking in a place where there's a lot of people, if you have a little smile on your face, you start seeing other people smile back. And they're almost shocked because they see a smiling face. So the more you smile, the more you affect the world around you in a positive way. That means holding that image of the smile in your heart. Okay, the next part of the Eightfold Path is called right speech. And I've never liked this interpretation, so I've called this harmonious communication. Now this harmonious communication is not only with other people, but it's with yourself. Who do you spend more time talking to than anybody else? Yourself. What kind of thoughts and what kind of speech do you give yourself? The more you communicate with yourself in an uplifted, happy way, the easier it is to see when your mind gets caught by something and starts to get pulled down. And then it's easy to notice that how the 6 R's work again, so that you can start letting go of the critical thoughts. I think just about everybody is very, very critical and hard on themselves. They're harder on themselves than you are on anybody else, because we expect perfection all the time. And when we don't have that, then that's a good opportunity to start communicating with ourselves about how bad we are and how we made this mistake and how we should be better than we are. The shoulds.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
So the more we start communicating in a kind and loving way to ourselves, about ourselves, the easier it is to see the good and kind way to communicate with other people. Now the next one is called right action, and I again changed that a little bit, and I call it harmonious movement. The harmonious movement is watching your mind and not snapping your mind around from one thing to another. Now this also has to do with physical actions and movements and being aware of things around you and how to take care of the things around you. Then we have right livelihood. I've always loved this. In the suttas themselves it says right livelihood means that you don't kill living beings, you don't sell poisons, you don't sell firearms. What has that got to do with meditation? So I call this harmonious lifestyle. What is a harmonious lifestyle? What do you put in front of your mind? For instance, there was one lady that came to me and she said she was having horrible dreams, really scary dreams. So I asked her why. And she said, I don't know, but it might have to do with these horror movies that I go to see. And I said, well, don't do that anymore. And she said, but I like them. And I said, then don't come to me and complain about bad dreams. what kind of lifestyle was she living? She was living a lifestyle that caused unwholesomeness and fear to arise in her. The more we can live a lifestyle that's in balance, and we can start creating being in harmony with what we're doing in the present moment, the easier life becomes. Now, one of the things about harmonious lifestyle is I had one student that came and she complained to me about the state of the world. And I said, "Do you read the newspaper?" And she says, "Well, I read 3 of them every day." And I said, "Stop, don't do that. There's nothing in the newspaper that's uplifting. You never read things about people that do good things and make other people happy. You always read about death and corruption and all the political stuff that makes you angry. So you don't need to read a newspaper." "Well, how am I going to be informed?" Any major thing that happens, you will find out about it, because other people will tell you about it. I don't read the newspaper, except the sports page whenever I get around it, but that doesn't count. Back in 2004, right after Christmas, there was a tsunami that came and it just wiped out a whole bunch of people, and there was all kinds of destruction. I heard about it within an hour after it happened. Somebody wrote me an email and they told me all about the destruction of the tsunami that happened in Sri Lanka, and how terrible it was and all of this sort of thing. I didn't need to read the newspaper to find out about it. And watching the news on TV, even watching TV is somewhat questionable, because TV has a lot of negativity, and it's real amazing. I was in Asia for 12 years, and then I came back to America. In that 12 years that I was gone, all of a sudden the radio and the television, they're starting to use foul language regularly. We don't need to listen to that sort of thing. The less foul language that's used around us, the better, the more uplifted your mind becomes. So, right lifestyle has to do with the kind of books you read, the kind of things you put in front of your mind. Oh, there's one other part that was always part of the right livelihood, and that was not to traffic in buying and selling slaves. What does that have to do with us here? No, not much. The next part of the Eightfold Path is right effort. And we've already talked about right effort. Seeing an unwholesome state, letting go of that unwholesome state and relaxing. Smiling and bringing up your object of meditation and staying with your object of meditation. That's real simple to say. It takes practice. The next part of the Eightfold Path is called right mindfulness, harmonious observation. And the last part of the Eightfold Path is called right concentration. I never use the word concentration. because the word concentration is misunderstood. Anytime you hear the word concentration, everyone assumes that it's one pointed kind of concentration, where you start reading a book and you're so involved in the book and somebody walks up to you and they say something to you and you don't hear them because you're so concentrated in what you're reading. So, what I call right concentration is harmonious collectedness. A mind that's collected is very alert. A mind that's collected is very calm. And it can be still, just like one-pointed concentration is still. But it leads to a different end result when you're practicing meditation. One-pointed, or the right concentration in the text always say that it's the 4 jhanas. That's what right concentration is. It doesn't ever mention anything about neighborhood concentration or moment-to-moment concentration. Those are added later in commentaries, but they don't agree with the 4 jhanas themselves. Now the 4th jhana has 4 different parts to it. Sometimes people call it the 8 jhanas. And there is another state after the jhanas that's called the cessation of perception and feeling. And some people say that that's the 9th jhana. And you can talk about it that way, but it's a little bit confusing. The cessation of perception and feeling, because there is no perception and there is no feeling, is a state right beyond the 8th jhana. But it's not a jhana itself. All of the jhanas, when you start talking about jhana, they are levels of your understanding. When you get to the cessation of perception and feeling, because there's no perception and there's no feeling, there's no understanding at that time. So it's not really as correct as it could be to call that the 9th jhana. I'm having a hard time tonight. Lady, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Friend Visakha, that clinging is neither the same as the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire, the lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there. Did you catch that? Want it again?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll go through the whole thing. Is that clinging the same clinging as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Friend Visakha, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm
it's,
seeing a lot of blank faces out there.
so it's pointing to dependent origination, it's pointing to craving happening, the clinging, the lust and
Lust and desire,
Desire.
Is craving.
right.
Yes.
So it's pointing at the
So,
craving
so it's
being the cause.
the craving aspect of clinging.
Ooh. It's also saying that the aggregates are not automatically affected by clinging.
That's right.
Ooh.
They are not automatically
Well,
affected
clinging
by
to me
clinging.
is more stationary. It's kind of you are with it and it gets stuck with it. You cling.
We'll see what...
And craving is the process to clinging.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
kind of
But
beginning.
one of the things that I've done in other suttas when I run across the statement affected by clinging,
Mhm.
or the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, is I always stop and I say, it may or may not be affected by clinging, depending on how sharp your 6 R's are.
How sharp what?
The 6 R's.
Well, how sharp your awareness is. You have the choice to cling or not to cling. Always. That's the volition in Buddhism.
Well, yeah. Well, that comes after you have recognized clinging.
Sure, but if you have a definition of the craving...
It can be after you recognize, or it can be before.
Ah, yeah, right. Addiction, isn't it? Something like that.
Addiction would be the next step. That would be your habitual tendency with that.
Acting it out, the
Yeah.
clinging.
Yeah.
And we say we are stuck.
Yeah, we are stuck.
So you have
Depending on the
you have
sharpness
to do
of
the
our
same thing
mindfulness.
over and over again. And you
Until
don't
we
see it.
learn. Yeah,
Yes.
until we learn to be able to observe
Well,
how
that
it
means-
works.
Yeah, that means undoing the clinging.
Yes.
So I don't
That's
understand.
not so easy for those who are.
It
hanging
takes
on.
practice. Yeah, it takes practice to be able to do it.
Yeah.
But as you go deeper in your meditation,
Sure.
it does get easier, so.
I don't understand
I
why
think of my cigarette smoking.
the aggregates and the clinging are not separate then, if you may or may not cling to the aggregates.
Because the average person doesn't see that as may or may not. They see it as clinging.
Hmm.
They see it as their concepts of, or their story about,
That's the way I am.
yeah.
The average person doesn't have any definition of craving, doesn't know that's the condition for clinging, doesn't know what habitual tendency is. So without those definitions, you're totally caught in this. It's so fast to those 3.
So when
Addiction.
she said to Visakha, it's neither
That clinging is neither the same as the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. Okay?
What does that
But
mean?
that's really good because, see, that's fuel for talking to Bhikkhu Bodhi about this again. Because we brought up the question, if affected by clinging. And he went, but we had to find other texts that pointed to that,
Yeah.
that there's a choice. And so it shouldn't be
The
translated.
other translation is clinging aggregates.
Right, that's the other
And
translation.
That translation is really not very good.
And the Visuddhimagga backs up that angle without any question. Yeah.
Okay. Lady, how does identity view come to be? Here, friend Visakha, an untaught, ordinary person who has no regard for the noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards forms as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self, or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He regards perception as self, or self as possessed of perception, or perception as in self, or self as in perception. He regards formations as self, or self as possessed of formations, or formations as in self, or self as in formations. He regards consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view comes to be. So it's always trying to make one of the whichever aggregate it is, personal. In any of the different ways. And this gets real tricky, and this is how the Brahmins during the time of the Buddha got caught by making everything God. And God is, in the way of most people thinking, is this permanent, never-changing entity. And that really goes against what the Buddha is showing us. There is nothing that's permanent, ever. We're going on about a discussion about this. She seems to say that the Four Noble Truths are permanent.
No, I just had that idea for about an hour.
But it's not, the Four Noble Truths are always around, but they're not recognized.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, they're always changing.
They arise and pass away, arise and pass
Yeah.
away.
How about Nibbana?
You see, if you say
Same
they
thing.
are permanent,
Same thing.
we objectify them. We make it a kind of an entity.
Yeah.
They are, and that's what I also feel is really done with the jhanas. The jhanas, you see, they are an entity, but they are the same like the Four Noble Truths. They are the motion of a process.
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely.
And objectifying means you have a possessor here, someone which has made it an object, actually. And that goes wrong identity.
Lady, how does identity view not come to be? Here, friend Visakha, well-taught noble disciple, who has regard for the noble ones, and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men, and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard material form as self, or as self-possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He does not regard feeling as self, or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He does not regard perception as self, or self as possessed of perception, or perception as in self, or self as in perception. He does not regard formations as self, or self as possessed of formations, or formations as in self, or self as in formations. He does not regard consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or self as in consciousness, or self as in, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness, excuse me. That is how the identity view does not come to be. In other words, that is the 5 aggregates not affected by clinging. The Noble Eightfold Path. Lady, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? Friend Visakha, it is just this Noble Eightfold Path, that is harmonious perspective, harmonious imaging, harmonious communication, harmonious movement, harmonious lifestyle, harmonious practice, harmonious observation, and harmonious collectedness. Lady, is the Noble Eightfold Path conditioned or unconditioned? Friend Visakha, the Noble Eightfold Path is conditioned. Lady, are the 3 aggregates included by the Noble Eightfold Path, or is the Eightfold Path included by the 3 aggregates? The 3 aggregates are not included in the Eightfold Path, friend Visakha, but the Noble Eightfold Path is included by the 3 aggregates. The harmonious communication, harmonious movement, and harmonious lifestyle, these states are included in the aggregate of virtue. Harmonious practice, harmonious observation, and harmonious collectedness, these states are included in the aggregate of collectedness. Harmonious perspective and harmonious imaging, these states are included in the aggregate of wisdom. Lady, this is the section on concentration. Lady, what is collectedness? What is the basis of collectedness? What is the equipment of collectedness? What is the development of collectedness? Unification of mind, friend Visakha, is collectedness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are the basis of collectedness. The 4 right kinds of striving are the equipment of collectedness. The repetition, development, and cultivation of these same states is the development of collectedness therein.
Didn't you say that right kind of striving is the same as right effort?
Yes.
Okay.
So, this is rather interesting because it says the unification of mind is collectedness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are the basis of collectedness, which is saying that the 4 foundations of mindfulness is talking about states of jhana. Remember we did the 4 foundations of mindfulness a few days back. And you got to see how it was always talking about the jhana states.
How does the 5 aggregates work into that? Because the 5 aggregates are simply the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
No, 3. 3 aggregates.
No,
Oh,
different aggregates we're
I'm sorry.
talking about.
I'm sorry.
So what do you say?
Okay, because the four foundations of mindfulness is essentially the basis for jhana.
Yes.
But we, in the previous discussions last week, we had said that the 5 aggregates and the 4 foundations of mindfulness
Right.
are, the same.
Basically the same thing, yes.
Basically.
So, but then, it's almost saying that then the 5 aggregates are the basis for a jhana.
Yeah.
Or the letting go of the 5 aggregates are the basis for jhana.
Well, but it's not letting go, because when you look at the chart, wherever that happens to be, you got it there. Okay. So they're basically saying that they're the same thing. And these four foundations of mindfulness, they arise while you're in your practice. And that would be the basis for the foundations, or for the collectedness.
Here.
Because I always thought the 5 aggregates were the basis of ignorance, because that's
Affected by clinging.
affected by clinging.
See, that's the tricky part.
If it's affected by, okay, okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay?
Bhante, like the 4 foundations being the foundation for jhana, if you look at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and does it mean like if you examine them, the body, feeling as feeling,
Yes.
and you
of
see
course.
things as they actually are,
Yes.
then that allows you to go into jhana. Is that what you mean? when you
Of
say-
course.
Okay.
There's some translations that are changing the 4 foundations to say the body in the body, and the feeling in the feeling. And that is the basis for the choiceless awareness.
In support of the commentary thing.
Yes.
Okay. So that's where that
But
translation.
it doesn't, the choiceless awareness doesn't really work, because there is that craving with whatever arises, and there's not seeing the craving, so you can let it go.
That makes sense, yeah.
And your mindfulness with choiceless awareness, it doesn't develop nearly as quickly as coming back to an object of meditation. The object of meditation is your home base. So if you're just going from one thing that arises to another thing to arises, to another thing that arises, you're not having that, you're not practicing the 6 R's, and you're not coming back to your object of meditation so you can see how it gets distracted again.
Okay, so you never get to see dependent origination that way.
No.
I see why now. Okay. Can't watch it.
Okay, formations. Lady, how many formations are there? There are 3 formations, friend Visakha. The bodily formation, the verbal formation, and the mental formation. But lady, what is the bodily formation? What is the verbal formation? What is the mental formation? In-breathing and out-breathing, friend Visakha, are the bodily formation. Thinking and examining thought are the verbal formation. Perception and feeling are the mental formation. But lady, why are in-breathing and out-breathing the bodily formation? Why are thinking and examining thought the verbal formation? Why are perception and feeling the mental formation? Friend Visakha, in-breathing and out-breathing are bodily. These are states bound up with the body. That is why in-breathing and out-breathing are bodily formations. There are other bodily formations outside of the breath too. When you start radiating loving kindness, there is the feeling that is, it has to have a body in order to feel. So it's not only in breathing and out breathing. First, one thinks and examines thought, and subsequently one breaks out into speech. That is why thinking and examining thought are verbal formation. Perception and feeling are mental. These are states bound up with mind. That is why perception and feeling are the mental formation. The attainment of cessation. Lady, how does the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling come to be? Friend Visakha, when a monk is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, it does not occur to him, I shall attain the cessation of perception and feeling. Or, I am attaining the cessation of perception and feeling. Or, I have attained the cessation of perception and feeling. But rather, his mind has previously developed in such a way that it leads him to that state. Lady, when a monk is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, which states cease in him? The bodily formation, verbal formation, or the mental formation? Friend Visakha, when a monk is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, first the verbal formation ceases. Then the bodily formation, then the mental formation. Lady, how does emergence from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling come to be? Friend Visakha, when a monk is emerging from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, it does not occur to him, I shall emerge from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling. Or I am emerging from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling. Or I have emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling. But rather, his mind has previously been developed in such a way that it leads to that state. So when perception and feeling cease, that will last for a period of time, not a long period of time. It lasts 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. And then when the perception and feeling arise again, it's like you had a chalkboard and you cleaned the chalkboard off. And then when the perception and feeling come back up, you see the ignorance, the formations, the consciousness, you see the mentality, materiality, and all of the rest of dependent origination. And then you see how they cease. When this doesn't arise, that won't arise. When that won't arise, this doesn't arise. The clear understanding of seeing dependent origination in this way is such a big understanding that your mind goes, oh, wow! And nibbana occurs. Your mind doesn't really go, oh wow, but it's that kind of an experience. I mean, it is consciousness altering. And that's how nibbana occurs. Now, if you have the slightest bit of attachment to being unsure, being afraid, that will stop this sensation of perception and feeling from arising. So you want to make sure that your mind is completely open and accepting of this state. It can be a subtle little, I don't know if I really want to do this or not. And we have to let that go. Guaranteed you'll like it on the other side of this. Oh, but it's going to change me. Yes, it will. You're going to have a lot more fun. Your mind's going to be a lot more clear.
All due to right understanding.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic, it's really humanity.
Yes, it is.
And we live in it. And that we cannot see it. And then that seeing blows everything.
That's the importance of the cessation of perception and feeling.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Can you get into that state with any of those waverings?
No.
No, right, okay.
Have to let go of all of that stuff.
You're down the rabbit hole once you get in there.
Yeah, you're,
That's kind of one of the reasons that the mindset that Sariputta had was kind of neat, you know. And we usually say sometimes the mindset of the person is like a little 2-year-old who's just looking around the corner to see next. No apprehension about what might be there. No desire to see what's there. Just looking around the corner to see what's next. And if you can hold that frame of mind and just go curiosity, like it's an adventure to see what this is going to be, you can do that.
Is there an event where a person could have cessation of perception and feeling and coming out of it not see the dependent origination?
I've never heard of it. That is part of the process of it. And his seeing with wisdom, his taints were destroyed. Seeing with wisdom is always seeing dependent origination. So there can't be even the slightest bit of hesitation or anxiety about, well, what's going to happen if I do it? There has to be just that openness of saying, let's see what happens next.
You know, it was interesting because somebody showed up once who apparently had the experience but didn't know anything about what they saw. And it's funny because I had asked him the question about 2 weeks before this person showed up to ask him what happened. So, you know, he didn't have any idea what he was seeing. He could describe
But when I went to the suttas and I started reading it, his eyes got real wide and he started going, oh, yeah, mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's an example where it can happen to a person, but they have no idea what this was that happened. You know?
Well, he went through a change, and he knew he went through a change, and he started going to a lot of teachers, and they agreed he went through a change, but they couldn't explain it.
Well, was he meditating kind of on his own? Or, I mean...
I kind of got the feeling that he was.
He was a professor at Tulane University who was in the Buddhist Studies department, so he had exposure to a lot of different types of things, you know, and he was, I can't remember what he told us he was practicing when this happened, but it wasn't harsh. I remember it wasn't harsh.
So it was some kind of a practice.
And so he fell into this,
Mm-hmm.
but when he saw the links,
Mm-hmm.
he could not get an explanation of what this was from any teachers until he came to Bhante. And then he explained what it was, and I was there when he was explaining it, and his eyes just really he knew precisely that's what this was all about, and then he stayed for, I think it was a week or 2 weeks, to get into what all of this, and it came together really fast for him, his understanding.
What's that? Of whom are we talking?
A young man that came to Bhante about 4 years
Five-
ago,
5
5 years ago maybe, I can't believe it's that long. 5 or 6 years back, he showed up in the wintertime to talk to Bhante about what had happened to him personally and what he had seen. And he saw the 12 links when he came out of cessation. He saw them go up and go down, but he didn't understand. He had no definitions, no training at all.
No frame of reference.
No frame of reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he didn't know what it was. And when Bhante gave
But
him the
he liked the
definitions.
experience.
And then he recognized it after he had the intellectual and
Yeah.
explanation.
It came together really
Yes,
fast for him.
right.
In just a few days, he could understand all this stuff came together to him, really clearly. And he went through a personality shift,
Mhm.
you see. He knew that.
So there can't be the slightest hesitation for any reason at all.
Mhm.
Well, my life is going to change after this happens. What's going to happen? Well, yes, it will. Your mind is going to be so much more clear. Your
But it
mind
could-
is going to be so much more alert.
It could also happen the other way around. That, like the so-called Advaitas people, they go first to understand everything, so intellectualizing to such an extent that the intellectualization somehow falls off and the experience appears.
Yes. And that can happen for the first stage of enlightenment and the
Yes.
second stage, but not the
Not
higher
further.
stages. And that can happen through meditation too.
Right. Yeah, so it makes sense to me
Yeah.
that it works that way too.
But after a person has the path knowledge, they still have to work for the fruition knowledge.
Yeah.
And when the fruition knowledge comes, then they have a sense of what stage of enlightenment they are experiencing.
Yes.
And we'll go into that at another time. In a couple of days. I have another sutta that we'll talk about. Okay. Lady, when a monk is emerging from the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling, which state arises first in him, the bodily formation, verbal formation, or mental formation? Friend Visakha, when a monk is emerging from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, first the mental formation arises, then the bodily formation, then the verbal formation. Lady, when a monk has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, how many kinds of contact touch him? Friend Visakha, when a monk has emerged from the attainment of perception and feeling, or cessation of perception and feeling, 3 kinds of contact touch him: voidness contact, sightless, signless contact, and desireless contact. I want to see what Bhikkhu Bodhi said about those. The first state of consciousness to arise on emerging from the cessation is that of fruition attainment. No, that's not right. That is taken from the Visuddhimagga and Abhidhamma both, and it is not correct. There is a belief that once you have the path knowledge, now there's 17 different parts of a thought moment, okay? And there are 7 jhana moments, and you attain Nibbana in one of those 7 jhana moments. And they have the belief that the next jhana moment is the fruition. And that's just not right. You wouldn't know that you had fruition if it happened that fast. And there are people that will have the path knowledge for a period of time before they get the fruition knowledge. So, what he's saying here, I think we have to let it go.
What did it say?
It said
Voidless.
voidness,
Voidless. Signless.
signless and desireless.
I can buy the desireless mind, okay, voidness.
Well, there's
What?
not a lot happening in your mind. I mean, there is consciousness and you're aware, but there's not going to be a whole lot of thoughts arising in your mind at first.
Why couldn't the voidness refer to the voidness when you come out, the voidness of the craving, clinging, and habitual tendency? That voidness of that. When you go back to 121 and look at the definition of voidness. Voidness of the craving, clinging, and habitual tendency, and
I think we'll have to let that go for a little while. That doesn't feel right.
research time.
Yeah, it's research time. Okay. Lady, when a monk has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, to what does his mind incline? To what does it lead? To what does it tend? Friend Visakha, when a monk has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, his mind inclines to seclusion, leans to seclusion, tends to seclusion. For a little while. It's such a major release of tensions and tightnesses that the joy that arises is really strong. You will feel it in every cell in your body. There's relief. And if you happen to attain that and you come and tell me you attained it and I say, good, now go sit. That's the last thing you feel like doing. But if you do it, there's great lessons that you'll have from 6Ring and letting it go and allowing the feeling to be there. Your mind will have the opportunity to go in deeper again, and you can have the fruition fairly quickly. It depends on the conditions. So this kind of experience is what we're working for. Is it attainable in this lifetime? Absolutely. Do you have to be a monk to get it? No, you don't. Do you have to be a monk after you get it? Maybe. I know. It depends on what happens. Feeling. Lady, how many kinds of feeling are there? There are 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. But lady, what is pleasant feeling? What is painful feeling? What is neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, whatever is felt bodily or mentally as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is felt bodily and mentally as neither soothing nor hurting is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, what is pleasant feeling? What is painful feeling in regard to pleasant feeling? What is painful feeling and what is pleasant feeling in regard to painful feeling? What is pleasant feeling and what is painful feeling in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Here, friend Visakha, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it persists and pleasant when it changes. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge of it, and painful when there is no knowledge of it. Why is it painful? When there's no knowledge of neither perception, or neither pain nor pleasant feeling.
Because it bothers you and it nags.
Say that again.
Okay. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge of it, and painful when there is no knowledge of it. Why is it painful when there is no knowledge of neither painful nor pleasant feeling?
Because it's ignorance, or it's delusion.
That's there's a difference between equanimity,
And neither pleasant or
well,
painful.
but it's, and, come on,
There's a difference between
Indifference?
equanimity and neutral or...
Indifference?
indifference.
Indifference.
Indifference has I am attached to it.
Mhm.
And that's what we're talking about here. That's why it would be painful if there's no knowledge of it.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's one of the big mistakes today is that equanimity they think is indifference, and equanimity is not indifference. It's not.
No, it's balance.
It's much bigger
Very,
than
very
that.
much. Okay, we have some underlying tendencies. Lady, what underlying...
Ron has,
Does that mean that there's allowance, that's the allowance in equanimity? Is the
I didn't hear the word. The what?
allowance?
Allowance?
Allow it to be?
Yes.
There's no craving, okay. That's what equanimity, indifference is.
Indifference
I-
is saying
I-
it, who cares?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what underlying tendency underlies pleasant feeling? What underlying tendency underlies painful feeling? What underlying tendency underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust underlies pleasant feeling. That means the potential for lust is there when there is pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion underlies painful feeling. Painful feeling arises, the first thing your mind wants to do, get rid of it, push it away, not have it around, aversion. The underlying tendency to ignorance underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling. What is ignorance?
Not knowing the Four Noble Truths.
Not knowing the Four Noble Truths, and that's the underlying tendency to indifference. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust underlie all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion underlie all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance underlie all painful, or all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie all painful feeling.
Pleasant.
All pleasant feeling, excuse me. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, what should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Here, Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance have to be abandoned in regard to all painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency does not to lust does not have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Here, friend Visakha, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and examining thought, with joy and pleasure and happiness born of seclusion. With that he abandons lust, and the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie that. So not all pleasant feeling has lust arise in it. When you get into a jhana, at that time there is no lust or a tendency for lust to arise at that time. Here a monk considers thus, when shall I enter upon and abide in that base that the noble ones now enter upon and abide in? In one who thus generates a longing for the supreme liberation, grief arises, and with that longing as condition, with that he abandons aversion. The underlying tendency to aversion does not lie within that. What did that just say? Okay, we'll do it again. Here a monk considers thus, when shall I enter upon and abide in that base that the noble ones now enter upon and abide in? In one who thus generates a longing for supreme liberation, grief arises, and with that longing as condition, with that he abandons aversion. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie that.
It's basically saying that if you're longing for it, you can't get there.
That's right.
That kind of desire is going to keep you from getting there.
That's
In
right.
other words, that's where this mindset comes in, where you just, the 2-year-old doesn't have any desire for anything to be around the corner. He's just looking, when you watch him.
Is that because the aversion is to the present moment? To being in.
The
Yeah.
aversion is not having what you want when you want it.
And doesn't it, that gets confirmed in 36 too, where he figured out pleasurable moments are permitted in all of us. And we figured that out in Majjhima Nikaya number 36. Up to that point with all his practices, he thought no pleasure was allowed at all as an aesthetic, none. So he couldn't do this kind of aware jhana, this lighter jhana, because he had to kind of torture himself with what he was doing, the way they were doing everything. And he figured that out in that
That was
sutta.
actually a major insight. Very major. That not all pleasant feeling
Yes.
Has lust underneath
has
it.
lust underneath it.
If you're in the jhana and you're enjoying it and want it to stay, isn't that lust?
If you're enjoying it and want it to stay,
It'll go.
it'll go away so
Just like
fast.
that.
So there's not even that
Because
tendency?
when you're in a jhana, your mind is very pure. And the way that it becomes pure is by not having craving at that time. If you have the desire to keep that jhana all of a sudden, you're not in the jhana anymore. And you have I am that attached to that desire. Yeah.
But you also can experiencing without lust,
Yes, of
even
course.
not being in jhana. You have not to be in jhana for experiencing pleasant feelings without lust, right?
Yes, as long as there's not the identification
Yes,
with it,
right.
not the craving with it.
Understanding for those processes is sometimes enough to experiencing.
Well, every time you
The lust
use,
comes in very quickly then, you know.
it certainly can.
Very subtle.
It certainly can be. But that's one of the reasons I tell people when they get into a jhana and they experience the joy, that they 6 are the joy. They don't try to make the joy last longer or try to hold on to it in any way. You 6 are, and you allow the joy to be there and come back to your object of meditation. That's the way to have it last longer.
It's like lovingly accepting the present moment exactly as it is. So the student comes and he goes tomorrow and he says, I'm going to have another session just like yesterday. And it won't work.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
You know, everybody's been through that.
Why doesn't it work?
Because of the attachment.
It's craving.
The desire.
And
Craving.
it causes restlessness to arise because you start trying to avoid it. It doesn't come when you want it to come. So you start leaning out of the present moment a little bit more, trying to make it come, and all of a sudden you're attacked by restlessness.
I think also what you're doing too is you're judging that present moment and comparing to what the past was.
Right.
And in that process, you're pushing the present moment away. And it's happening at a very subtle level, so you never really are opening to what's happening.
Right.
It's also a jump ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
And that is a separation right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, here with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a monk enters upon and abides in the 4th jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. With that he abandons ignorance, and the underlying tendency of ignorance does not underlie that. So we're talking about getting into equanimity instead of indifference. And that, then the ignorance doesn't underlie that. Counterparts. Lady, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, painful feeling is a counterpart of pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Painful feeling. Pleasant feeling is a counterpart of painful feeling. What is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Ignorance is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of ignorance? True knowledge is the counterpart of ignorance. What is the counterpart of true knowledge? Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. What is the counterpart of deliverance? Nibbana is the counterpart of deliverance. Lady, what is the counterpart of Nibbana? Friend Visakha, you've pushed this line of questioning too far. You were not able to grasp the limit of the questions. For the holy life, friend Visakha, is grounded upon Nibbana, culminates in Nibbana, ends in Nibbana. If you wish, friend Visakha, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this. As the Blessed One explains it to you, you should remember it. Then the lay follower Visakha, having delighted and rejoiced in the Bhikkhuni Dhammadena's words, rose from his seat, and after paying homage to him, keeping him on the right, he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told the Blessed One his entire conversation with the Bhikkhuni Dhammadena. When he finished speaking, the Blessed One told him, "The Bhikkhu Dhammadena is wise, Visakha." The Bhikkhuni Dhammadena is wise, The Bhikkhuni Dhammadena has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that the Bhikkhuni Dhammadena has explained it. Such is its meaning, and so you should remember it. That is what the Blessed One said. The lay follower Visakha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. That is high praise coming from the Buddhas. And he does that not only with Dhammadena, he also does it with some monks, and says that that's exactly the right way to say it, and I couldn't have said it any better. Yeah.
I have a question. She became a bhikkhuni, but he continued to be a lay follower, but he was
An anagami.
anagami.
Yeah.
So you could still be a lay person being an anagami.
Yes.
So when you were talking about going through the attainment of perception and non-perception, the attainment,
Yes.
you said that one would become a monk.
Maybe.
Maybe.
That's what I mean. It can be that you would become an anagami, or you would become an arahat. If
Oh,
you
I
become
see.
an arahat,
Then you become a monk.
then you would become a bhikkhuni, or as it says in the suttas, you would die within 7 days, because you need the purity of the sangha. And there are people that chose to die after 7 days. The Buddha's father, he was very ill, and he became an arahat, and he said, "That's enough. I don't want any more." And he died as a layman. He didn't take on the robes.
But I thought there's a problem about bhikkhunis because the order is,
Don't worry about it. I'll arrange it. Okay?
You get there and we'll talk, right?
Yeah. Well, but it's not something to be afraid of
Uh-huh.
at all. The advantages of becoming an arahat are really, really big. Because the clarity of your mind means that there is no ignorance ever arising in your mind again. And that's a big one, you know, and the advantages of what arahats do, it depends on their personal bend. Some of them become teachers and some of them don't, but they always wind up helping people.
But there's an attraction naturally to such people. It is.
You say there is, or what
Yes,
is?
there is.
Oh yes, definitely.
The sensitive people, even maybe not so sensitive, they perceive the radiation of their purity.
Yeah.
But you have to go through fruition to attain one of those states.
That's right.
If you just have path
There
knowledge.
is no real personality development with the path knowledge.
Right.
The personality development happens at fruition.
Right.
As what?
At fruition, at
Yeah,
Maga.
at-
And it can happen at any time. I mean, you can be washing the dishes or mowing the lawn or doing whatever, and you'll start to feel that your mind is just going deep, and you say, okay, I'm going to go sit down for a little while and watch what's happening. And then it will happen by itself. But the thing is, you have to really be careful after the path knowledge to keep your sense doors and not be attached to your sense doors, and you need to be careful with what your mind is doing. I mean, there can be a tendency for some people to say, I've already attained this, I don't care, I can go out and do anything. And they can actually never have the fruition arise because of that. And that is a problem.
Isn't there that one sutta that talks about how you can lose
Yeah.
the attainment? It talks about how you can have the attainment and lose the attainment just because of that, because of not having the fruition. And the Buddha talks about the different attainments and how that person still has work to do, and that what he means is the path, the development of the
Well,
development of
everybody has work to do until they become an arahat with the fruition.
Yes, real.
Now, do you want to ask me whether I know whether a person's become an arahat or an anagami? Haven't got a clue.
Yeah, I wouldn't
That's
think
going to
so.
happen by itself.
Mhm.
So essentially, when you have the cessation of perception and feeling, you would have to, you have the path of that, and then there's the fruition of that
Right.
at each stage of the
Right.
enlightenment process.
Right.
So it's conceivable that you can have path, I want to say knowledge or path
Mhm.
attainment, but you can die in the process.
Mhm.
And what would happen if that occurred? Is there anything in the suttas that
The Samyutta Nikaya talks about if you die fairly quickly after the attainment of path, the fruition knowledge would occur before you died, right before you died. And this can happen fast, but it's not necessarily going to be fast.
See, like if
But how could you lose that attainment? Because you said there's a sutta that said you can lose your
But
attainment.
if it happens that you would die in the next day, you still have your sense doors are still being guarded. I mean, it takes a while to wear that down and get back to, quote, the way you were.
So, is there like does the sutras actually have a time frame between path?
No.
No.
So it could be anywhere from
Anywhere.
years to
It can
seconds.
be days or seconds. It depends on your karma at the time.
But you can lose the path.
You can lose the
Knowledge.
past knowledge if you indulge in your sense pleasures, and you don't, you can still break the precepts. Things like that.
Okay, but if you were to
I'm
die,
saying that if you were to die, and you broke the precepts, and you didn't watch your sense doors, that attainment would do you not much good. You wouldn't get the fruition. Yes.
So you can't party after
So
And when you look at this, I mean, the Sotapanna, the Sakadagami, Yanagami, there may be an inclination to party, but the Arahat is probably not going to have the arising craving or clinging happening, so your Arahat is like
There's no personality development until the fruition
Fruition.
occurs. You still have the potential of the fetters arising. And if you don't take care of that in a wholesome way, then you're hurting yourself very deeply.
Yeah, this is, I think maybe you answered it there. Fruition knowledge is just I don't know what fruition knowledge is, I guess. It gets you have this process, this attainment.
Right, and that's
And it-
called the path.
Uh-huh.
And you have to have path and fruition knowledge for the personality development to occur. And the personality development would be getting rid of either 5 fetters or 10 fetters, depending on
Remember, sometimes they talk about the 8 kinds of individuals, the 8 kinds of, it's actually 8 kinds of attainment. There's not 4, there's 8. Okay, so it's the Sotapanna and the Sotapanna with fruition, and then the Sakadagami and the Sakadagami with fruition, and then the Anagami with the Anagami fruition, and the Arahat with the Arahat fruition. So there's the 8 kinds of individuals.
and then Bhante, so if you were a Sotapanna in this lifetime, and you die, and you were born as a human, are you an automatic Sotapanna, or do you have to re-realize
No,
that?
you would remember that experience when you're fairly young. It would come in a dream, and you would know beyond any doubt that you are a Sotapanna.
What is a Sotapanna?
First step of enlightenment. You would come back no less or no lower than a human being, and you can come back as many as 7 times before you would attain Arhantship and Parinibbana. You can be reborn in a heavenly realm and attain Nibbana, Parinibbana from there. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of days. I'll bring out the sutta and show you where it says this. Okay? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, let's share some merit then. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. may beings inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.